Welcome to the Smart Protein Summit. As you probably already know, my name is Varun Deshpande and I'm Managing Director at the Good Food Institute India. We're delighted to host you over the next 5 days as we take you through some deeply exciting and insightful sessions at breathtaking speed. You'll hear from leading global and Indian experts in alternative protein, the broader corporate landscape, and policymaking. Now, fair warning, this is a COVID conference, and my team won't love me for saying this, but stuff may go wrong at some point. Maybe my dog Bella will want to make an appearance and want some attention. Maybe my internet will go out or yours. And I guarantee that somebody is going to drive motorbikes outside this window, shattering the illusion of this very professional conference. And that's okay. My biggest regret is that I can't be with you in person as we take this journey from scarcity to abundance together. So I'm going to take the opportunity to kick things off by talking to you one-to-one. Do you recognize this image? It's a pretty striking one if you look closely. It's the kind of image that was likely plastered across your TV screens for many months earlier this year, especially if you're in India. The COVID-19 pandemic this year left millions of migrant workers stranded all over India. Many, like the people in this photograph, women, men, children, walked hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers to get back home to their families. Just a few months after this photograph was taken, swarms of locusts flew from East Africa over the Middle East into India, damaging crops and threatening farmers' incomes in 7 states. Climate change created the perfect cocktail for those swarms to be the biggest in decades, and they may affect crop yields and food security for several years in India. These are indicators of the kinds of challenges we face in countries like India over the next decades. Problems of scarcity. I'll give you a couple of further examples. The Indian government think tank Niti Aayog has said that COVID-19 or not, major Indian cities like New Delhi, Bengaluru, and Chennai will run out of groundwater this decade. And 40% of Indians will have no access to drinking water by 2030. The World Food Programme, on the other hand, says that, especially because of COVID-19, the number of people facing acute food insecurity in low and middle income countries will double in 2020. That's a huge blow in a country like India, which already houses 1 in every 3 malnourished children in the world. Scarcity robs us of our ability to flourish, to live fulfilled lives, to shape our own destinies. And scarcity will be felt even more keenly, even more devastatingly in countries like India, with our young and vulnerable populations and our strained resources. We've come to a fork in the road. Tragic as it is, COVID-19 has given us that much. Set against this backdrop of pandemics, of food insecurity, and climate change, we have the opportunity to take a step back and ask ourselves, how will we feed 10 billion people by 2050 in the face of all this scarcity, and without making that scarcity even worse? Over the next decade, we have a choice of 2 paths. One of those paths is to go back to the old normal and even double down on it, to continue to rely on the systems that brought us here. The other is to think about a fundamentally different paradigm of development, one which leads us away from scarcity and towards a more resilient and abundant planet. As we think through this decision and figure out how to set in place the systems to nourish all of those people, one system that is particularly in dire need of an upgrade is our global protein supply. And that's why we're all here today. So you will know that in particular, I'm talking about meat. I'm talking about red meat, I'm talking about white meat, talking about eggs and dairy as well. We currently use a vast amount of resources to get protein from animals. Over 3/4 of agricultural land is already used to support livestock, with more and more encroachment on dwindling forests and shrublands happening all the time. But all of those resources only provide us with roughly 1/3 of global protein supply. So why is this happening? It sounds like a recipe for scarcity. Why are we using all of these resources for such meager returns, mathematically speaking? It's very simple, and it has to do with a very simple underlying truth. We eat animals who eat plants. A chicken, which is the most efficient animal farmed for meat and by far the most widely eaten meat in India, takes in 9 calories of input for every 1 calorie it gives us in the form of flesh. And fish, depending on the fish, can be worse. Pigs are definitely worse, and cows are much, much worse. Putting it differently, we all care a great deal about food waste, with roughly 40% of all food produced globally being wasted. And we should care about it, especially because of all the hunger that I was talking about. But with 9 calories in and 1 calorie out, what we have here is vastly worse than 40%. It's 800% food waste. And of course, all of those steps involved in feeding, raising, transporting, slaughtering chickens and other animals are very hard on the environment too. It's why chickens emit 40 to 60 times more carbon dioxide per calorie of protein than lentils, and why animal agriculture is responsible for more climate change than emissions from all transportation on the earth combined. That's all planes, trains, cars, all transportation. It's also why the United Nations and a whole bunch of other people say that if we care about deforestation, greenhouse gases, ocean acidification, species loss, ocean dead zones, or any number of other environmental challenges, rethinking protein is one of the highest priority things we can do. And of course, in a year dominated by the COVID-19 pandemic, the public health risks of animal agriculture have also come under the scanner. The vast majority of antibiotics produced globally are not fed to humans, but to farm animals, to prevent disease outbreaks and because they make the animals grow faster. It's a system that's leading to antibiotic-resistant superbugs and which caused the former head of the World Health Organization, Margaret Chan, to declare that the world is heading towards a post-antibiotic era in which common infections will once again kill. This will be the end of modern medicine as we know it, she said. It's important to remember that these sorts of risks affect those who farm these animals too, perhaps most devastatingly so. The Chinese economy is so dependent on pork that its consumer price index, or CPI, is sometimes jokingly called the China Pig Index. Over the last couple of years, outbreaks of zoonotic disease like African swine fever have resulted in the loss of over 100 million pigs per the official agencies. That is 60% of the entire industry. We've seen this happen over and over with multiple outbreaks of avian flu, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, causing chicken farmers in India to cull their birds. And several challenges with salmon and other fish farming in other parts of the world, resulting in huge losses to those producers as well. This kind of risk and pressure on producers and the attendant public health risks of the spread of zoonotic disease is why the UN Environmental Programme also says that if we want to prevent the next pandemic, we need to address the human demand for animal protein, and quickly. It's a chilling message, which is of course particularly relevant in these trying times. But as we know, outlining these reasons to reduce our demand for animal protein hasn't really worked over the last decades, despite increasing knowledge about all of these risks. People want to eat meat, eggs, and dairy. In fact, the world's population is expected to rise by 30% by 2050, but poultry demand is expected to more than double. This is going to be primarily driven by countries like India, where meat consumption is associated with aspiration and it's a symbol of status. If you look right there, India is in red. So what do we do when eat chickpeas, not chicken doesn't seem to be working? Well, how about giving people exactly what they want, just made in a different way? Over the course of the summit, you're going to learn about the transformative innovations driving the food industry forward and showing promise to help producers and consumers make a switch from inefficient animal protein on the basis of things that matter to them: taste and price and economic benefit. You're going to hear about plant-based meats, which offer the same cultural or sensory resonance as conventional animal meat, but which are made entirely from plant or crop ingredients, like the Beyond Burger. The Beyond Burger is made entirely from plants, but if you swap one of those beef burgers that Americans eat every week for a Beyond Burger, it would be the equivalent of taking 12.2 million cars off the road or powering 2.3 million additional homes. And that's because it's made from plants. It's why Beyond Meat won a UN Champions of the Earth Award in 2018, the same year that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi did as well. And what about the Just Egg, which is made from ingredients such as the mung bean, which have been grown in India for over 4,000 years? In our keynote speech coming right up after this, you're going to hear about how the Just Egg uses 98% less water, has a 93% smaller carbon footprint, and uses 86% less land than conventional animal sources. You're also going to hear about cultivated meat, which is made by farming animal cells directly, instead of raising and slaughtering livestock in that inefficient process. Like Aleph Farms or Shiok Meats or Memphis Meats, the world's first cultivated meat company, which was founded by Andhra Pradesh-born Dr. Uma Valetti, and which in 2016 made the world's first cultivated meatball. In short, you're going to hear about foods that are enabling a switch away from the incredibly inefficient animal protein production platform. You're going to hear about how these innovations are pulling in the world's major corporations and governments, the people and organizations who can help us effect a paradigm shift in the global protein supply. Like one of the biggest conventional meat companies in the world, Tyson Foods, whose then CEO Tom Hayes said in 2018, if we can grow meat without the animal, why wouldn't we? All of this is going to sound incredibly exciting, and we think you're going to come away from the conference filled with hope and inspiration that we're on the way to a more healthy, sustainable, and just global food system. But I want you to remember one thing throughout the summit. Progress is not inevitable. If we're going to go from scarcity to abundance over the next decade, we have to choose. We have to take the second path, not the first one. And we have to invest in sunrise industries like plant-based, cultivated, and fermentation-derived proteins, which have the potential to create millions of jobs, boost farmers' incomes in places like India, address malnutrition all over the world, and create a more resilient protein supply. We have to utilize all of our resources and our ingenuity to create that better protein supply from the ground up over the next decade. And we have to do it for ourselves, for our children, and for our vulnerable populations. Now more than ever, we need to take that second path. On behalf of everyone at the Good Food Institute India, thank you very much for joining us at the Smart Protein Summit. Stay tuned for our keynote chat with Josh Tetrick in just a couple of minutes.